Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Kubota. I'm the chair of the Commission on Buddhist Education for the Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii. And I'm so excited to have all of you here this morning, both in person and on Zoom. So we have a wonderful, wonderful session ahead of us, LGBTQIA plus 101. So in opening, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on why we're here and why we're having today's session. So for those of you in person, we actually passed out our brochures, Buddhism and Coming Out. And for those of you online, we hope to get that to you soon. But just a little background about these brochures. The Commission on Buddhist Education has taken on a project of developing brochures to provide guidance for various life stages so that we look at how Jodo Shinshu Buddhism can focus and provide guidance for all of us during our lives. So some of our topics we thought we might do Buddhism and bullying, Buddhism and parenting, Buddhism and retirement, Buddhism and end of life. But we had heard that we have some youth in our organization that have been challenged with their gender identity and coming out. And we really wanted to start with this topic first so that we could show our support and to provide guidance. So today's session is just the first of several sessions that we'd like to provide for education and training, not only for our ministers, but our lay leaders as well, and community members, so that we can all begin to understand the LGBTQIA plus community and some of the challenges that the community members are facing. And we want to develop strategies for being more welcoming, inclusive, and supportive. Today, we are very fortunate to have an accomplished and knowledgeable presenter, Camaron Miyamoto. Camaron is a tenured faculty in the Department of Student Affairs, where he is the director of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Queer Plus, or LGBTQ Plus Center, and adjunct faculty in the Department of Ethnic Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa from 2002 to the present. Mr. Miyamoto continues to learn from his students at UH and is fueled by the belief that we will create a better future through compassion, education, and a steadfast commitment to social justice. We are also very honored to have a distinguished group of individuals on our panel who are members of the LGBTQIA plus community and parents of LGBTQIA plus community members. We will be introducing the panel later in today's session. I'd also like to give a heartfelt mahalo nui loa to our Bishop of the Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii, Bishop Eric Matsumoto, who is in attendance today. Thank you so much, Bishop. And Dr. Yay. And Dr. Warren Tamamoto, who is our Hongwanji president and unable to join us today. Thanks to them, we are able to have today's session and future events. Before we start, I'd like to share a few quotes. First of all, from Martin Luther King Jr., "The time is always right to do what is right." Next, a quote from Maya Angelou. "In diversity, there is beauty and there is strength." And finally, as you listen to our presenter and our panelists today, please remember what the Dalai Lama said. "An open heart is an open mind." So please keep your hearts and minds open. Now I'd like to introduce Reverend Blaine Higa, who is the resident minister at Kona Hongwanji on Hawaii Island, the Big Island. He is the chair of the Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii's Committee on Social Concerns and would like to say a few words.
Aloha, Debbie. Aloha, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for this very important training and seminar. And so, as Debbie mentioned, this is part of our commitment as a faith community, as a Sangha, to cultivate healthy Sanghas, to nurture spiritual communities that affirm and uplift the lives of all who come to our doors and in our communities. Our world today, we are facing unprecedented attacks on women, people of color, LGBTQIA plus communities, among others in our country. And it's important for us as a faith community to be able to affirm our universal value of compassion that embraces all and affirms all through better understanding, through better living our values. And this is part of that effort. And we're so glad that so many of you have joined us today to be able to learn how we can be better fellow travelers along this journey of life, how we can better affirm each other in our humanity. The late Reverend Kenru Suji once said that enlightenment is a growing experience that never stops. So this is an opportunity for us to learn and to grow and to deepen our understanding of the Dharma, our tradition, but also how we can put the Dharma into action in our daily lives in real, tangible, life-giving ways. And part of our learning, right, as we learn and we grow, we also are unlearning. We are unlearning old habits. We are unlearning old stereotypes and old worldviews that are life-limiting. And so let us together venture on this journey with joy and with gratitude and with awareness. And with that, please join me in Gassho and let's recite the three treasures together. I go to the Buddha for guidance, the one who shows us the way in this life. I go to the Dharma for guidance, the way of understanding and love. I go to the Sangha for guidance, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Entrusting in the Buddha of all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion, we call the honored name in gratitude, joy, and awareness. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Again, mahalo for coming, and let's have a great session together.
Thank you so much, Reverend Blaine. Well, are you ready to start our journey? Well, let's do so with open hearts and open minds. I'd like to turn our program today over to our presenter, Camaron Miyamoto.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much, Reverend Blaine, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Bishop, for being here today and your amazing support of this endeavor. I'm so honored to be here today, to be part of this dialogue that has already started and that you all are committed to. In knowing that the Honpa Hongwanji is committed to ensuring that all beings will enjoy lives of harmony, peace, and gratitude. And that's why we're here to talk about LGBTQIA plus communities. And over 100 of you signed up today saying, yes, I want to be part of this. And you asked all kinds of amazing questions. Most of them were, what can we do as Buddhists in our practice to support LGBTQIA plus? So just want to let you know that's what the focus is today of the presentation and also of the panel. And in follow-up that we already have planned following this session, additional sessions to have deeper discussions about what that means and what it can look like. So what we are going to be doing today, we just did the welcome with the coming out brochure. I'm going to be doing an LGBTQIA plus 101 for about 30 minutes. I keep saying LGBTQIA plus, so I'm going to say, what is that? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, aromantic, and ally. I'm going to break it all down. And a big part of it gets to one of the questions that was also asked. It's like, well, what are we going to be doing for the older generation? We've already heard that this is a request, something, a longing from the younger folks saying, we're coming out, we're dealing with our identity. Our reverends have been so helpful. And then at the same time, we have older folks who are saying, I've never heard of this before. This wasn't around when I was growing up or even when I was older. What are we talking about? So this part is going to help facilitate that intergenerational dialogue so that we can all have a shared language. So that's the LGBTQIA 101. I'm going to do a little bit about history of our local community of us folks who are LGBTQIA+, breaking down what the different identities are and the diversity of our community, and then share some ideas for allyship, ways that we can share compassion and respect for everyone. Then we'll have 20 minutes of question and answer, followed by a 10-minute break. And then we'll be moving into the section with our panelists. I'm really excited about this portion with the dialogue with our LGBTQIA+ folks here in the room and online, as well as family members of those who are LGBTQIA+. We'll have that panel for 30 minutes, followed by a 20-minute Q&A. Next. So what is LGBTQIA+? It gets broken down into 3 main areas: sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex. So 3 different cluster areas. So sexual orientation, I put my hands on my heart. It's like the people who I'm attracted to, who I love, who I respect, who I affirm. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's based on gender. So then we get lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, asexual, aromantic without attraction. Heterosexual or straight is another one, but I just listed the ones that fall under LGBTQIA+ there. Then we have gender identity. I put my hands on my head. It's like, and my body, understanding through and through my relationship to my body, myself, and my understanding of my gender. Sometimes it matches, and sometimes it doesn't match the sex I was assigned to. And then we have sex. I wrote down, and for gender identity, I have transgender for LGBTQIA. I'll go into more detail later. I just don't want to put all the terms out there right now. But transgender for folks where their assigned sex doesn't match their gender identity. So say I was born male, but I know, that doesn't feel right. I look at myself in the mirror and I know I'm female. I know I'm female. I have a disconnect through and through. I know myself as female, so I'm a transgender woman. And then the last one is sex. A lot of us were told that only men and women in this world exist. Thank you. Only men and women exist. We also have folks who are intersex. An old-fashioned term for that was hermaphrodite. Outdated, offensive now. Intersex, a blurring of different things around the assigned sex. So anything for anatomy, chromosomes, different things determine where you are. So the big thing we're going to be getting to is that it's not binary anymore. And I'll go into more detail of that, not just this or that. The world isn't black and white. There's a whole lot of us who are more than that, as an example. Okay, next slide. So a little bit of our LGBTQI+ history from our community here in Hawaii. Next slide, please. On the bottom left corner, you could see starting here in Hawaii, just want to position the history in Hawaii. We have folks who are kane or male, female, wahine, or in the middle, mahu. A place where people have a combination of male and female in body, mind, and spirit. How beautiful is that to know that at the beginning of time and history, we have an understanding that acknowledges the existence of people who are perhaps non-binary. And to know that in Hawaiian history and culture, there are traditional roles of respect in healing, the arts, religion, chant, hula. There's an amazing exhibit right now that's at the convention center that you can see on the healer stones of Kapai Mahu. It used to be at Bishop Museum, but now it's moved to the convention center. The healer stones sit in Waikiki right next to the substation and the Duke Hanamoku statue. But there are 4 amazing stones that have the embodiment of the healing powers of 4 Mahu who came from Tahiti to teach folks here in Hawaii the healing arts. So folks who are Mahu, a place between male and female, are known for embodying the healing arts. So to think of it, it was like, oh, the poor folks who are LGBTQIA+. Instead, it's like, oh my gosh, the wisdom, the knowledge of folks who are LGBTQIA+. So things changed a little bit since that place of respect and wisdom. We started to get forgotten about for various reasons. With the changing of Western churches, colonization history, things happen. I'll just leave it at that. And the, I guess, old way. Hello? Okay, were forgotten. And we kind of went underground in terms of LGBTQIA+ communities, but things started to change. And it started to change when we moved into the public scene, say, on the US continent, when we started to push back and say, you know what, we've been hiding in bars and clubs, but we're getting tired of the police brutality and discrimination that's happening to us. Regularly, our clubs and bars are being raided by the police, and people are being put in the paddy wagons, arrested, pictures being put in the newspapers to try to shame us. One day at the Stonewall Inn in New York City, our LGBTQIA+ folks led by transgender women of color and lesbians, butch lesbians, said, no more. We will not put up with this anymore. And we pushed back against police brutality. And that's the amazing start of what is now the Pride Festival that we have every year, because June marks the day when our LGBTQIA+ community first said no more to the police brutality. We started resistance, and this happened, it sparked resistance nationally. In Hawaii, what was going on the bottom picture center is an amazing club that was in Chinatown on Bethel Street. It was called the Glades, and that was our local club. Families, people from the military, people, everyone just went, and it was no big deal. And until some folks in the military started to get arrested for dating transgender women and drag queens, and they're saying, I didn't know that they were drag queens. So what happened was there was an ordinance that said, we're going to make the performers wear buttons that say, I'm a boy, I'm male. We have smart drag queens here in Hawaii. They said, I'm a boy, go to the Glades Club. Here's the address. So they started advertising on their button where you could meet me. So that was kind of like a smart kind of local resistance of our drag performers here in Hawaii. Slowly by slowly, we moved out of the shadows at night into a more vibrant community. We now have what's National Coming Out Day, but that started in the 1980s when we were saying, you know what, we are not going to be quiet anymore, especially as so many of folks were dying from AIDS in the 1980s. And it's like, no more shame, no more hiding. We're going to be public with who we are, and we're not going to pretend to be straight. And we're going to have some pride in being out. And that was the beginning of that movement in the 1980s. I'll just say, moving into the 1990s, here in Hawaii, I don't think enough of us celebrate. Hawaii started the marriage equality movement in the nation. It was UH Mānoa our director of the Women's Center, or plaintiff in the case that sued the state of Hawaii for the right of folks to marry people of any gender. And Hawaii won in terms of saying, you know what, saying that you cannot marry someone of the same gender is discrimination based on sex. And that became the basis of marriage equality. And that lawsuit that we won here became the basis for the marriage equality movement that we now have nationally and has been growing internationally. That picture in the top right corner is the moment where marriage equality was legalized for the state of Hawaii. We celebrated, we screamed, we danced, we cried, we hugged each other, and then we did the electric slide. Right there in the rotunda. And then that picture on the bottom is a picture of me and students celebrating who we are, LGBTQIA+, LGBTQIA+ and ally, and being who we are without shame and celebrating each other and the full diversity of who we are in the Pride Parade that in Hawaii takes place every October. So that's the nutshell of LGBTQIA+ in Hawaii. And now I'll move into the section on the different identities. Next slide. Next slide. So this is my friend, the gender unicorn. And I use the gender unicorn to talk about gender, sex, and sexual orientation or attraction. I said before that we no longer have just male and female. We have to acknowledge beyond that binary of male and female. So that's why you could see there's masculine, feminine, female, male, and other listed on all of these. There's 3 bars, probably more, but 3 bars on each of these. Also, it's not one fixed finite dot. It's a continuum for each of these. Kind of like that old-fashioned equalizer. If you're my age, you remember equalizers on stereos. We could turn it up, pull it down, but that's how we could map out our relation to our gender identity, our gender expression, and our attraction. So all of these different identities can be explained using the gender unicorn. All the green stuff is related to gender, the orange stuff and red stuff around attraction, sexual attraction. The red one is around emotional attraction, and I'll get to the difference between emotional and physical attraction later. I'll use myself as an example to talk about the gender unicorn. So my sex assigned at birth is male. Actually, before I was born, my parents are told, congratulations, you're going to have a boy. Immediately, they came up with ideas of what that meant. Oh, he's the firstborn son of the firstborn son on the Japanese side. He's going to become a medical doctor. He's going to have a blue nursery. None of that happened. My room was yellow and I'm the director of an LGBTQ+ center. But my point is, like, how fair is it to my parents that they had to change expectations and dreams just based on this thing of gender? It gets into that sticky thing of like, what are we setting it up? What are we setting ourselves up for with gender reveals? I mean, I don't know if they're as popular as they were a few years ago, but like the excitement. Okay, my first gender reveal was for my cousin, and he was having a gender reveal. They shot off the cannons, and he already had a daughter, and then the thing came out pink, and he went, "Oh man!" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is on film." So weird, the expectations we set up, and how fair is it to ourselves as the parents, and then to the kids. So just this one thing, we set up meaning where there can be some unfairness. Now, sex assigned at birth can relate to gender identity. Oh, and there's the chromosome DNA thing, because it relates to the physical body, anatomy, chromosomes, DNA, a whole combination of stuff in there. An old-fashioned term for it is biological sex, but that's being outdated, especially in LGBTQIA plus circles, where we talk about assigned sex to point out the arbitrary nature of what is it that we really look to say this is one sex, because it is socially constructed, because we choose certain things to look at. Not just gender socially constructed, but now for gender, we have gender identity. As I said, the rainbow thought bubble, like when I put my hands on my head for gender identity, how do I understand myself through and through? And I said, for me, it's male. My biological or my assigned sex is male, and my gender identity is male. I never thought, oh, I don't feel right in this body. It's not comfortable for me. It just, I was like, right on, I'm a guy. And for me, that means what kind of a guy am I? I'm a cisgender guy, cis being same for cisgender, as opposed to transgender. If, for example, I was male assigned at birth, but had a female transgender identity because I was like, this body is not right for me. I look at myself at the mirror and I have a disconnect. Then I would be a transgender woman. So trans being like traversing was one of the way I think of it as cisgender for same. Also to point out, we could also have non-binary identities. I said we have male and female as the typical binary, but then we have folks who might be non-binary. One way of saying it is like, that male-female stuff just does not work for me. I'm on the other gender spectrum, and you could be anywhere in terms of presenting. For some non-binary folks, you could be on all three, with some female, from some male, and some other. But there's a blurring and something that goes beyond just the female and male. Let's see. My gender expression. This one, I am all over the place. In terms of a lot of feminine, some masculine, a whole lot of other. That's where I am right now as someone who's 53 years old and comfortable and confident in who I am. That's not where I was when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was typically depressed. I did everything I could to try to live up to my parents' expectations of what a good, straight Catholic boy would be. I tried dating. I tried sports. I tried, dating women. I tried to be as much of a masculine, straight guy as I could. I tried to walk the way they wanted me to walk, talk the way they wanted me to talk, and would be proud that I could pass as straight. That was probably until I started grad school, when I started to become more comfortable with who I was. So where I am now, a lot of feminine, a lot of masculine, a lot of other masculine-ish, because I just don't have time to care about how you perceive me. But when I was depressed and worried about it, it was very different. Another way to show how it changes over time and how it could be influenced by our environment. Okay, now physical attraction and emotional attraction. I just want to point out why we have two. How do we describe meaningful, loving, respectful relationships? It's not about just sex. I don't think it's fair for any of us to limit and define who we are by who we have sex with. And this is a way to say, you know what? There's so many different ways to celebrate a meaningful, loving, compassionate relationship. At minimum, some of it is physical attraction and some of it is emotional attraction. So that's what this is getting at here. And some of it can be gendered. In terms of physical attraction, yeah, I'm attracted physically to guys, masculine guys. So men up there, other genders, and women not so much. Typical masculine-ish, cisgender gay guy for me, according to the gender unicorn. And emotional attraction, I'm kind of equal opportunity. Like, who do I turn to in a tough time? People of any gender. Like after a bad day, I talk to men, I talk to women, I talk to non-binary friends, all sorts of folks. Some people, and I just want to talk about aromantic and demi-romantic as folks who don't see the relevance of romance in their lives. Maybe someone who says, I really don't understand why prom is so important in the culture of my school. I don't understand why all my friends are obsessed with which wedding dress they're going to wear 10 years from now and watch these shows every day. I do not understand how any of that can relate to an identity for me, because it actually kind of annoys me. So those folks can be aromantic and say anywhere from repulsion to discomfort to just does not apply. So just wanted to share that, as well as asexual, where you could have not sexual attraction also. And these are two of the A's for in the LGBTQIA plus. Okay, next slide. And here's a cartoon to go over the gender unicorn information.
There is a difference between sex and gender. Sex refers to the physiological and reproductive characteristics of a person. At birth, a midwife will assign either a male or female sex to the baby by inspecting its genitalia or primary sex characteristics. For example, John was assigned male at birth. This was because he had all the primary sex characteristics that fit into the label of male, and Jane had the characteristics of female. However, there is a label called intersex that is neither definitively male or female, which will hopefully be in another video. The word gender is summative of the two phrases gender identity and gender expression. Gender identity is a person's concept of themselves, male, female, both, neither, regardless of assigned sex. Gender expression is a communication of a person's gender identity through forms of representation. Here is John. His gender identity is male, and gender expression is masculine. He likes to cut his hair short and shops into the male section of the store. Jane's gender identity is female, and she expresses as feminine. She keeps her hair long and shops in the female section of the store. Sam's gender identity is genderqueer, and their gender expression is androgynous. They like to keep their hair short and shop at the unisex section of the store. Harry's gender identity is agender, and their expression is gender neutral. Harry shops with Sam and thinks that clothes should not define gender. Clothes are just clothes. Now that we have explored the meaning of gender, it is time to look at the differences in gender identities that occur when sex and gender are compared. Cisgender. Gender identity is the same as assigned sex. John's assigned sex is male, and his gender identity is male. Since these two are the same, John would be referred to as a cisgender male. Transgender is a gender identity that is different to an assigned sex. Jane's assigned sex is male, and her gender identity is female. Therefore, we would refer to her as a transgender woman. Genderqueer is a gender identity that is not exclusively male or female. Sam's gender identity is genderqueer. Genderqueer can be an umbrella term for the names listed on the side. agender, no gender identity or a neutral gender identity. Harry's gender identity is agender. Agender can also be an umbrella term for the terms listed on the sidebar. Please see the information box below for more information and resources. Please contact me if you want to use or reference this video made on Powtoons. Please see the links below. I have my Tumblr and all that. Thank you.
I want to talk about ideas for allyship, ways that we can support people who are part of a group that we're not part of, a marginalized group that we're not part of. So for those of us who are cisgender, what can we do to support non-binary or transgender folks? For those of us who are heterosexual, what can we do to celebrate and support lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual folks, queer folks? Next slide. One of the things that was mentioned in that video that talked about transgender, cisgender, genderqueer or non-binary, and agender was pronouns. And I think that's one of the most important things for us to do today, is to be able to honor someone's pronouns, to not question them, to not say they're not valid, but to learn on our own time what it means and why it's important, especially for those folks who use they, them pronouns, which are very common right now. Yeah, so we could ask people, which pronouns do you use? We can share ourselves whenever we introduce ourselves, like, hey, I'm Cam, nice to meet you. My pronouns are he, him. So I could let the person know that I'm talking to, that I understand pronouns are important. And for our young people, it could be really scary to think about, is this adult, is this person I trust respectful enough to honor my pronouns, or are they going to shame me for being different? So when I put the invitation out there, it's a way to be a good ally, because it's really stressful. And it could be stressful for us too, because we might go, you know what, I want to respect everyone's pronouns, but how do I find out? So for me, sharing mine is the best strategy. So I just share it to everyone so that everyone should share it with me. What we don't want to do is only ask people, oh, I think that person's transgender. Ooh, I think that person's non-binary. I'll ask them. No. Then we accidentally offend people. So instead, I just ask everyone. If we create forms for intake and run programs, it's really important to be able to find out what pronouns people use. Another one is to find out what names people use, not just their legal name. And for lots of our young people, it's hard to use the name that affirms their gender because they might not have the ability to change it legally yet. Sometimes it's because the parents might not support it, or they just might not have access to the legal resources and the understanding of the legal system and the money and the ability and courage to go to the lieutenant governor's office to do that. So one of the things we do if we run programs and just talk with people is to find out, hey, what's the name you go by? Honor it and find out what their pronouns are. Okay, next slide. Oh, and it happens to be law too, in terms of male, female, and other non-binary is on our driver's licenses and state IDs. So that's one of the things we could also think of as a reason why it's important to honor this in the way we run our programs. Next slide. And also, please think about what we say, because it can impact negatively someone, even if we don't mean to. So this one here, I'll just share, why don't you ever wear dresses? I might not say that because I'm transphobic, but I could accidentally be opening a wound where this person might be told every day of their lives, you look too manly. Why don't you wear a dress? I might be saying, come on, please just wear a dress for grandma. There will just have no arguing. Everyone will just be happy. It's just a stupid dress. But actually could be opening a wound that goes over years. And these kinds of repeated things called microaggressions do more emotional harm on individuals and sometimes even a one-time physical assault in terms of the long-term impact. Next slide. So, in thinking about what we do on a daily basis, I want us to just think about our children and our future generations. Will I let them play the way they want to play? Will I let them dress and laugh and talk the way they want to talk? How is it hurting me by allowing that to happen? And what can I do to make sure that everyone in our society has the ability to do that? So thank you for the LGBTQIA plus section. We're done with this section of the 101, and I'll be moving into the Q&A section now and handing it over to Debbie. Thank you. That's the end of the PowerPoint.
What a wonderful presentation, Cameron. Thank you so much. I hope that helped everyone to at least have a small introduction to the LGBTQIA plus community. I want to thank everyone for all of the wonderful questions that they submitted online and in person, and even during the chat today. I do want to say that this is an introductory session. We did receive a lot of questions about Buddhism and how does Buddhism relate to this community. And I want to apologize that we won't be able to get so deep into the religion today, but that's what our future sessions are for. And we welcome you to join us as we all delve deeper into Jodo Shinshu Buddhism and how we can support the LGBTQIA community. So I will try to mix things up a little bit from pre-submitted questions and some questions submitted here in person. So one question that we have, which is an interesting one, is how can I teach middle school students about tolerance, and any strategies are welcome? Cameron, can you help us with that?
Sure. I think tolerance is very foundational for any age level, and it's a really good way to start. I think when we're at middle school, we can even talk about what can we do to celebrate respect. And I think that's something to start with. It's like, we need to be respectful of each other, and you deserve respect yourself, and everyone deserves respect. And as a result, that means we should respect differences, and diversity is foundational to that. Part of that diversity is LGBTQIA plus diversity. Everyone deserves respect regardless of how they love and who they love, how they dress, how they identify, how they express their gender. We could have exercises and learning modules where we teach about diversity, fairness, and respect in there. Have journaling, and where students can reflect on their own lives and what respect means to them and ways that they can respect others. Also at the middle school level, I think we could lean into allyship and talk about, what do you want to do to be an ally for someone who's different than you, and ways that you could be supportive of a friend. Because all of us, I believe, can remember some time in our lives where we were made to feel small, where we were made to feel we weren't good enough because of part of who we are. And I think one of the strong things about allyship is when we could tell a friend, I see you, you matter, and I'm here for you. I want to talk. Your experience is important to me. What can we do to make things better? And how can we change the things that are making you feel small? As an instructor, that's something you can stand behind and say, in my classroom, we will always have respect and we will always tolerate one another. So thank you. Awesome question.
Thank you. And this is a question from someone here in person. How should family members embrace a relative who comes out? What is appropriate and what is not appropriate?
In reflecting on my experience, the main thing I wanted to know and my biggest fear was that I wouldn't be loved anymore. And to know that I am still loved and I still matter is the thing that's most important to share. Lots of times if I'm coming out to you, it's because I respect you. And I believe that you'll be someone who I trust and will love me still. I think one of the good things to do is to listen to what that family member is sharing and why, and to just reassure them that you are the same daughter, you're the same son, you're the same grandson, you're the same nibbling, that's a non-gender term, in my family, and I love you and respect you. Thank you for sharing this with me. I think it's important to thank them. It's like, I'm so honored that you feel comfortable inviting me into your life in this deeper way. Things might be tough. Please know that I will be with you on this journey. Thank you for inviting me in.
Also, the same person had a question. At what age is it appropriate to accept a child's declaration that he or she is gay?
I feel like if a child is thinking about it and has put thought into it and has made a declaration, it is important to them. And they're saying something to you because they look up to you and they want to discuss with you a decision they've made. So it's as hard as it might be to say, no, it's too soon. I'm not ready for this. We have to listen with our hearts before we listen with our minds. And going, what is it in my child where they are ready to share this with me? And how can I support this in them? I do these trainings for DOE at various levels. And I was doing one where I was talking about non-binary. And one of the teachers says, oh my gosh, I didn't know what non-binary is. And it's like, so many of my students identify as non-binary. Thank you for letting me support them. So I was like, oh, what grade do you teach? I thought she was going to be a middle school teacher. She goes, oh, kindergarten. So that's just the reality right now in Hawaii, where we have so many kindergartners and so many young people who it's no big deal to, in a way that it was in my generation. Well, because I never heard of it growing up. It wasn't talked about yet. But I hear from my colleagues, their kids are like, Mom, it's just they, them, just get over it. It's part of who clothes are just clothes is another thing I hear. It was like, why do we put these meanings to it and judgments to it? So I think these are the kinds of things that we could question in ourselves when we get scared. And I think that's lots of times what it is the fear that our kid might get hurt. So because they're sharing it with me, they might be a little worried too. So my role as a parent might be, how can I be with them in that and talk about it with them? Yeah, question. Okay. So we have folks who are boys, we have folks who are girls, and that's the binary. Like two opposites. Someone who says, I'm not a boy or a girl. Yeah, saying, I'm not boy or girl. I'm in between. I'm non-binary. And then they have the little non-binary flag on their hydro flask. Yeah, and that's what she was seeing. She was seeing non-binary flags. Yeah.
Dinner with a friend, she has her stepdaughter is about that intermediate or high school age. She and her clique of like a dozen girls in this very small school were they declared themselves gay and they're part of their LGBTQ club. My friend's concern was that maybe this group of girls, they're doing it because it's the cool thing to do, not because they identify or they express but it's the fun, cool in thing. And her concern because she's an ally, her concern is that she doesn't want her stepdaughter to minimize or disrespect people who are seriously going through that struggle. But you don't want to also deny maybe her stepdaughter is going through that, but she wanted to have that talk with the stepdaughter to say that, are you sure? She doesn't know how to have that talk with her stepdaughter to both affirm the discovery and to not disrespect someone who's going through that struggle. So the kind of a two-part question is there a way, is it offensive that her stepdaughter might be disrespecting someone else's struggle, and should it be corrected, or is that identity something that her stepdaughter might be that age group where they're trying to discover who they are? That's just one more factor that they're going to explore, that they may come out of that exploration as still cisgender, but it's one more factor that you need to give them space to explore.
Yeah. I don't know. I have a feeling our panelists will be able to speak to this when we do the panel part, but I could share my nibblings experience. Right? Nibbling is non-binary. Nibbling is niece or nephew, non-gender. They recently came out in their senior year of high school as asexual and non-binary. Middle school through senior year was an ally in the Rainbow Alliance Student Club and thought of themselves as an ally. And I had my eye on them the whole time, saying, I'm here for you. If you ever want to talk, can you help me put together a training on LGBTQ? And what do you think would, so I did my best to be there for them, but they weren't ready to talk about it until their senior year. And for them, their growing experience was to be an ally all the way middle school through high school. So I believe that the gender sexuality clubs are important places for everyone to learn who they are. In the programs I do at UH in our LGBTQ+ center, I never ask people to identify. Like we don't go around the room saying gay, pansexual, bisexual, non-binary. It'll scare people away. And it's not a welcoming environment. So I think the most inclusive way is to allow people to do the exploration. The parent might want to talk with them about what's a good way to be polite in a shared space when you identify as an ally, so that you don't dictate what all the events are going to be and what the messages are and all the rallies, but that's a different kind of conversation. So I hope that's helpful.
It's not about her, the stepdaughter going through allyship. She says she identifies as gay.
Okay.
But it's like the number of girls at the size of the school seems a little disproportionate to the community. And she doesn't want her stepdaughter to say, I'm gay because it's cool, but rather if she's going to identify as gay, it's because she genuinely is.
Okay.
But she feels like if she's doing it because she's identifying gay as cool or being lesbian just because it's cool, it's disrespectful for people who are really going through the struggle.
Okay. In my experience, I haven't seen people identify as part of a marginalized group because it's cool. Like when I was growing up, when I was in the Gender Sexuality Alliance, it's like, why would I choose a life of discrimination? It's not cool. I don't want that. This is the last thing I want. But I say I'm that because it hurts me not to say I'm that. That's been my experience. Yeah.
Cameron, you said you were working with the Department of Education. So what is happening with that? Is the department developing a curriculum for students, teachers, as well as parents? Because there's a lot of terminology and things that we are totally unaware of as a parent. And if you have, and kids seem to know it more so than sometimes the adults. So what is happening at the Department of, because some of the things you taught, those slides that I just saw, I never saw them before. I didn't know all that terminology. Is that happening with the Department of, so I think because
It's happening in Department of Education, but where we are right now is educating the counselors, the teachers, the administrators, so they could properly share the information with the families. So it's more like at the level of making sure it's in the classroom, in the administration, and getting everyone there properly trained and up to speed. So that's where we are right now in the curriculum development. So is there more work to do? Yes.
We're having some great questions come in. We had a question that was pre-submitted, and I'd like to see if Reverend Blaine Higa can help us to answer. So maybe if we can have him on the screen. But the question is, I think some of our temples have had their social halls rented out for community events, such as drag shows. How do we wisely and compassionately explain this if a very conservative temple member expresses their disappointment with this?
Thank you for that good question. Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, right? When we face difficult and challenging questions, to be able to have mindful and deliberative conversation and dialogue about what is it that is prompting this sense of being uncomfortable with a situation, right? And kind of to go deeper and to probe our own understanding of a situation, right? And to kind of challenge our assumptions as we are doing today, right? This is part of a community discussion. As a faith community, how do we understand our living values, right? How do we understand who are we and who do we want to be? Guided by the Buddha's teachings, guided by the Dharma, right? And so, I think it's an opportunity to have a tough discussion, right? A difficult discussion, with that potential temple member who may have a problem. Ultimately, right, we operate through a board structure, right? And so our boards at our temples and our leaders will come to a decision, on how to use our facilities. But I think those discussions should always be guided by, right, our underlying values, right, of compassion, of universal compassion, and how do we express that, and how do we live those values in real, tangible ways and practical ways. And so, I don't think we should ever shy away from having tough discussions and tough, conversations. And so, I think there's no right or wrong answer. There's no easy answer. I think, as Cameron mentioned, it's very much we are dealing, right, with everyone's understanding of how do we relate to issues in our lives, and then how do we also unlearn some of our preconceived notions, to kind of go beyond our hesitancy, go beyond our sense of uncomfortableness, right? So yeah, I don't think there's any perfect answer, but I think it's an opportunity for mindful discussion, as a Buddhist organization, right, through the living Dharma. So.
Thank you, Reverend Blaine. I think Cameron might have a few other comments to share.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Blaine, and thank you for the question that was asked. In processing the teachings and in knowing that it's a board decision to make the space available to so many sectors of our society, is like, how exciting is it that the board chose to have a drag show in its facility? As members of that temple, I want to ask, how can we choose to celebrate that? And to say, we're proud that we had a drag show, and that's okay. We are one of the most compassionate, loving, and respectful places in Hawaii. Maybe we can own it and say, yeah, we're not ashamed that we did that. So that could be part of the discussion as well in the difficult conversation. But I just want us to think about, how can we be proud to say, yes, we celebrated a drag show. We didn't host it. We just rented it out like any other space we rent out. We rent out to so many different people, but yeah, there was a drag show here last Thursday. So yeah, I'm excited that they did that.
These are great answers. And, you know, as a Hongwanji, we want to be inclusive. We celebrate diversity and we welcome all groups. So thank you so much. And as a secondary question for this, also in Hawaii, do we need to be cautious of very violent critics in the community?
I think caution of violence is always a good thing. But one of the things I've been excited about in working in Hawaii compared to other places on the US continent is that I don't feel like the overt threat of violence is as strong, and it's something that needs to curtail any of our efforts to support LGBTQIA+ education programs and the celebration of our youth.
Thank you. And I think this will be our last question unless anybody else has a burning question. Cam, I know you covered this in your presentation, but I think it might be good to go over this again. But how did the word queer get added to the list and what is the background?
Okay. Yes, this is another one that gets to intergenerational because things have changed. When I was growing up, that's not a word we said. Unless we were trying to be mean to someone and insult them. But then also when I was in college, I started to do queer studies because we were reclaiming the word. We were working and some of us were fighting in the streets in terms of activism to reclaim it, to take away the sting that was used to, as I did in the presentation, like we were put in the shadows and told it's cool for the police to storm your clubs and put you in paddy wagons and print your pictures in the newspaper. But then a lot of us started to say no more. We won't put up with that. Queer Nation was one of the organizations when I was a college student that I was a part of. And a lot of the activism that happened around raising awareness around AIDS and the lack of funding and support was through Queer Nation. And we were a radical organization saying, we're going to stand up against the lack of federal support for funding AIDS research. We're going to be in your face and saying, we're queer, we're here, we're queer, we're fabulous, get used to it, was the chant that we would say marching down the street. And that was kind of the spirit behind the reclaiming of the word queer. During the time, because I mentioned I've been at UH running the center for 20 years, LGBTQ was in our name, and my email from the very start, it ruffled feathers when I first started, especially with faculty who was like, I'm offended that you're putting this in there. This was used to make me feel insignificant. But it's like, we have a lot of queer studies now. A lot of our students identify as queer. It's important to center that experience as part of the UH Mānoa LGBTQ Center. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. So I think it's time for a short break. So we'll have about a 10-minute break, and then we look forward to having our wonderful panel join us after the break. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started again. So thank you for coming back to our session. We have a very exciting second half of our session with a very distinguished panel. And before we get started with our panel, though, we noticed that another great question came into the chat from online, and I want to read a little bit about it for you. And then Cam is going to help us to answer this. So the question is, I want to know what considerations should be made for restrooms. In many places, including temples, public restrooms are divided only for males and females. Also, when leading a group trip to Japan, we sometimes stay in accommodations with only public baths divided for males and females. If a transgender person asked me, and this is from a minister, which restroom or public bath they should use, what would be an appropriate response? So Cameron, take it away.
Great, thank you, Debbie, and thank you to the minister who asked the question. I'll answer it from the lens of UH policy and what we do there. So in the presentation, I talked about both assigned sex, which used to be biological sex and we don't talk about anymore, and gender identity. So when we talk about any facility, we talk about gender identity. So when we have the transgender person asking, oh, which restroom should I use? They should use the space that corresponds to their gender identity. So if it's a transgender woman, she should be using the female facility. If it's a trans man, he should be using the male facility. We have a non-binary person and it's only male and female. It's up to them in terms of what space they're comfortable with. However, if we have the ability to define what the spaces are, we can designate spaces as all gender restrooms. And that's something we do a lot of at UH, is we can say a multi-stall restroom is an all-gender restroom. We could say that a single-stall locking restroom is an all-gender restroom. All the restrooms in my house are all gender restrooms. So a lot of us are used to all gender restrooms and they're useful for folks of any gender, folks with kids. Again, it's about the kids too, because like you have a kid who might be a different gender than you. So it's a very important question. And in terms of access, it's according to gender identity.
Thank you so much. So we will. Oh, I'm sorry. We have another question from the audience.
Thank you. Just to add to that, like, as somebody who identifies as trans, my partner also identifies as trans. And so like the onsen or hot spring issue is, we lived in Japan for about 7 years. And so that issue came up a lot. And yeah, if possible, if you do have the ability to choose which facility you book, finding one that has both like the more traditional onsen, but also private onsen, which could be onsen that, you know, is used for your group and that you can designate it as all gender or just the non-binary onsen.
Did you have something? Okay, thank you very much. So we will get on with our panelists. And I want to say that we have 6 panelists here and 1 panelist online. And I'm going to have all of the panelists introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, why they're here, and how they're affiliated with the Hongwanji.
And maybe also your pronouns? We'll go down the line.
My name is Piper Toyama. Him, his. I am a member of Jikoen, and I am the founding head of the Pacific Buddhist Academy. And I'm on this panel because my daughter is gay.
And I'm Lois Toyama, and I'm the immediate past president of the Federation of Buddhist Women's Associations. And they've taken a strong stand in support of LGBTQ, so I wanted to stick that in there. We share this daughter. She has a wife and she has 2 gorgeous kids. So we'll talk about that.
Hi, my name is Chihiro Okawa. I go by they, them pronouns. I am currently the president of the Hawaii Federation of Junior YBAs and a member of Aya Hongwanji. And I'm here today because I want to share the progress that Junior YBA has done because we fully support the LGBTQIA plus community and also to speak from the perspective of a non-binary queer person.
Hi, I hope you can hear me well. My name is Ben Brook. I use he, him pronouns. I am a humanities teacher at Pacific Buddhist Academy, where I've taught for the past 9 years. And my husband, Rudiger Rupman, was going to be here today. He unfortunately is actually doing a teacher training course because we're both high school instructors. But we are members of the Honpa Hongwanji Hawaii Betsuin. We've also at times been members and regularly attended IAEA and Jikoen Hongwanji because one Hongwanji is never enough. I just want to say I'm very excited to be here, and I'm especially excited to be here with so many people with ties to Pacific Buddhist Academy because I love what our school has been doing to try and support the LGBTQIA plus community.
Hello, I'm Richard Tyra. The reason why, I'm a he, him. Reason why both of us are here is because we have a gay daughter and we are members of Mililani Hongwanji.
And I'm Gail Tyra, and we share the same daughter.
And then online?
Hi, I'm Jay Yokoyama, or also people know me as Jamie. I am also part of the Junior YBA Federation. I am the Federation Treasurer. I am from Hongwanji. I go by all pronouns. I am gender fluid and also part of the LGBTQIA community.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for being on the panel here today. I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have. I have a few questions today, and I wanted to start off with a question for our LGBTQIA plus panelists. If you could answer this one. What was it like for you learning about who you are as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, and where did you find support?
Well, I guess I'll start off. So I realized that I was gay when I was probably in about middle school or starting high school. I knew absolutely no openly gay people growing up in the 1980s in Wisconsin. And the only images I had of anybody in the LGBTQIA plus community were from books, movies, and TV shows, and they were almost uniformly negative or at best neutral. The main time you heard about gay men was when there were news reports about AIDS and HIV. And as we know, in the 80s, the government was actually doing as little as possible to try and stop the spread of the disease, which is why Queer Nation and so many of those other activist groups were getting started. When I went to college at age 17, I came out, which was 1990. And I was very lucky to be in a very supportive place. I was in the Boston area. When I got to college, actually the resident advisor in my dorm was an openly gay man. And that was a huge opportunity for me to kind of learn from somebody who had already had some experience with coming out and living openly as an LGBTQ person at that time. One thing that's been very interesting to me in my lifetime, and I've said this sometimes to students, when I was growing up, and even when I came out and was out in the 1990s, I never had any idea whatsoever that it would even be an option for me one day to be married to a person of the same gender. That didn't even enter our minds as a thing that could actually happen in our lifetimes, let alone to have a child, as my husband and I do. And it's been remarkable to see that. I know that when I was at Harvard, the very first year I was there, it was about 1 to 2 years since the Gay and Lesbian Student Association had added the B for bisexual to their name, and that was like a new thing. And a few years later, just before I graduated, they added the T for transgender. I have no idea what it's called these days. But I was very proud to be there during that important time when we saw so many changes happening, and then to be able to live in Hawaii, which I think has been in the forefront, not surprisingly, of a lot of these moves towards diversity and inclusion. But anyway, those are, I guess, the things I've been reflecting on today, hearing some of the stories we've heard from Camaron.
I guess for me, because I'm more questioning of my sexual identity, I guess I can talk a little bit more about how I identify as non-binary. So for me, it's a situation where I knew from when I was really young that I probably wasn't male, but I didn't know if I wanted to venture into that transition of being female. Because at that time when I was younger, you hear about all the LGBTQ news, you hear this was a time when Bruce Jenner went through a transformation to become Caitlyn Jenner. So all the things in the news come out, and it's kind of a thing where I had to kind of question myself, like, what did I want? And I think for me now, I'm still trying to question that. I'm still trying to find an identity, but as non-binary, it gives me kind of like that comfort to know, like, I have like maybe some times where I may possess some traits on the male side or more on the female side, depending on how I dress or how I express myself. Regarding the community, I think that it is very important in the LGBTQIA+ as an individual to have a good support system. So make sure you have people who support you, who can understand, someone you can always talk to. So I was very fortunate to be at Pacific Business Academy. Everyone's very accepting. It's a very inclusive environment within the teachers and the students. So I was very fortunate to be able to be given that situation where everyone was like, okay, we accept you. How can we help you? So it's been pretty good so far. So, and I'm looking forward to how the transition will go in the future.
Thank you. Online?
Being part of the community, I first started discovering myself back in maybe middle school as well. Originally I thought I was transgender because I did not feel like I belonged in the same body. Like I liked a lot of boy stuff. I used to wear more boyish clothes, I guess, so to say. And that like drove me to think, oh, maybe I would rather be a boy. But at the same time, I was realizing, so gender fluid was something I found out more recently, maybe around my sophomore year of high school, which was basically like your gender can basically shift. So like one day I might feel like maybe a week. For me, it's been like every few weeks it'll shift, or a few months. But basically like, oh, I feel female a certain day, or maybe it shifts to being non-binary in that spectrum, and then going to more female side of me, like doing more feminine makeup or clothing. So it always has been varying for me, which I've realized now. But that discovery has been really helpful with some of my friends that I have in my community. I do go to a public school, so it's our school is more accepting. We have a Gay Straight Alliance club that people have been going to. It's been really helpful, and a lot of my friends have been my support system, and they're also identify either as non-binary, or maybe they're on that spectrum of like their sexuality is also different. I identify as pansexual, which basically means I kind of like everybody. But yeah, I think it's really important to have a support system in a sense, because things can go south sometimes, but having someone there to talk to is really important.
Thank you everyone for talking about and sharing who you are and how important it is for us to be there to support one another and to affirm that you have felt support in different ways. The next questions I wanted to talk about support with the parents. And for the parents, I was wondering, what were your first impressions when you learned from your child that they were LGBTQIA+, and how did it influence your relationship?
We had always had a feeling that she may be gay, our daughter may be lesbian, and throughout her high school years, there was a lot of you tell her, you ask her, you ask her. And I'm like, I'm not asking her, you ask. And so we didn't ask her. For which later she said, I'm so glad you didn't. But when she was a junior in college, she came home for the summer to work. And when she was walking out the door after lunch to go back to work, she said, I'm not sure about my sexuality. And I said, are you a lesbian? She said, you might say that. And then she went to work. And so I have one of my best friends from small kid time is a lesbian. So I called her up and said, okay, what's my best? What should I do? Like, what's my most supportive way I can be? And she said, just be how you always were. And so that's what we tried to do. But just as Ben said, I think because sometimes she had a boyfriend in high school and sometimes she didn't. But later she told me that she thought that she had this idea of lesbians all wearing, big work boots and, it looked kind of, so she wasn't sure if she was. So I thought that was an interesting, and she didn't think she knew anybody that growing up that was. So I thought that was interesting.
So there was a great deal of uncertainty during high school. I thought that she was gay. I wanted to ask her, but the question was never asked. So when we found out that she was gay, it was a huge relief for me. I said, oh, now my feeling was now she can live her life just as she is, and we can embrace her as the person she truly is. Because up to that, I was not certain. So that certainty was wonderful. It was a wonderful feeling.
Thank you. I'm a little emotional because, excuse me, sorry. But I want to commend you because you are so accepting when I wasn't. So it was hard for me and it took a while. And but we had many conversations about it. And I was that parent that said, I don't think you're gay or you're a lesbian. And so, but I think it brought us closer, but it was hard for me to accept. And I felt like it was like, like you're being, it was so, I didn't see it. Like you had a sense that your daughter was, but I didn't see it. So the funny thing is, I don't know if you're aware of the book, Honor Thy Children. Yeah, so I even had read that book, but when it happened to me and to my family, I had a really hard time in the beginning. But I think, anyway, it was difficult for me. So that was the question, right? What was my impression? Yeah. So
I guess for us, family has always been a really high priority for us. We always love our family. Our children, our daughters, right now, our granddaughters and grandsons and everything. So when she, I guess, talked to Gail about it first, and like for Gail and myself, I was totally unaware that she was gay, and so as far as for me, it didn't change anything. I always loved her, and then at that point, we just told her, we'll just continue to support you, whatever you decide to do. My first concern really was how will other people view her and what kind of life she's going to live. As a father, we always get concerned about our kids' welfare. For me, anyway. Gail is more on the emotional side about how she is going to feel emotionally. But for me, I'm thinking, well, who is she gonna marry if she has some? Is is she gonna get a girlfriend to marry? But, you know, it's kind of interesting. All those things happen later on, but we didn't know that at the time, but that's what I was concerned. How is she gonna make a living? Are people gonna hire her knowing that she's gay? So that was my basic concern, but she always felt welcome, I think, in our house, and it is still true today.
This next question is for all panelists. And I want you to think about what's it like being part of the Hongwanji community and connected to the LGBTQ plus community. How has being part of the Hongwanji community helped you in your journey as someone who's LGBTQIA plus or in accepting those who are LGBTQIA plus? Anyone want to start and then pass the mic?
I think I got the mic, so I have to go. So one of the things that's been so I came to Hawaii because my husband and I both actually were employed at Pacific Buddhist Academy. Neither one of us was a Buddhist. My husband, who's a member of like several temples, is actually still not a Buddhist. He's a Quaker, but I guess he's an honorary Buddhist. I became a Buddhist a few years later. And when I came here, I did not know much about Buddhism, and it turned out most of what I knew was not correct. And I'm very glad that PBA and the Hongwanji gave me an opportunity to find out about Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, which I think is an amazing form of Buddhism for the LGBTQIA plus community and for all people. One thing I hope to fit in, and I think I'll try to, is we had a talk in one of the temple groups that I participate in about how Jodo Shinshu is family-friendly Buddhism, because it is a Buddhism that welcomes families, but it's also one of the first forms of Buddhism where it encouraged ministers to get married and have families, not just live in a monastery. And I think we really need to push back against the idea that somehow family is in opposition to LGBTQIA+, because the two are the same. People are members of families. Our family certainly, but other families too. And you don't know who is going to be a member of your family now or in the future, and how they are going to feel about themselves. The other thing I want to say, because Lois is here in particular, is my husband and I are both members of the Buddhist Women's Association. We were among the first men to join the Buddhist Women's Association after the membership rules were changed to be gender inclusive. And the reason we joined is not actually because of gender identity of our own, but it's because we're the parents of a daughter who is a member of our Buddhist community. And we figured she is a Buddhist young woman. One day she may choose to take a place in the temple as a Buddhist woman. And the issues of Buddhist women matter to us. I mean, they matter to us anyway, but they matter to us especially because of that. And it's been wonderful to be involved in that organization, and to even be asked to participate in, the board of the BWA and in working on the pledge that was written with Lois and a few other folks who are in our audience today, perhaps, to represent what the BWA stands for in our 21st century here in Hawaii. And I think that's another way in which the Hongwanji is trying to be inclusive and show respect for people just as they are, and without respect to gender and other questions of identity that maybe in the past society has wanted to put people into.
I suppose for me to follow up, I think it is kind of a privilege to be part of a religion that is so affirming. I think regardless of the LGBTQIA+, whatever part or community you're part of in Jodo Shinshu, it's very welcoming in general. Everyone wants to help you get involved. Everyone wants to make sure that you're welcome. So that's definitely a great thing. I especially like the philosophy of Buddhism and how it really does connect to LGBTQIA plus, as we say, Buddha embraces all and come as you are. I think that because, well, my family's kind of split between Catholic and Buddhism. I stuck to Buddhism because unlike other religions, I thought that Buddhism was more of philosophy and more or less community. It's like, it wasn't necessarily a thing of saying you have to do this, you have to do that. It was a more way saying like, this is a path you can take, and it'll probably lead to a different way. It may not. It's just kind of like little tips in life. And I think especially Buddhism is our sect of Buddhism is a very good, very important part in connecting to real world because of our philosophies of impermanence, how especially when we learn this, we learn that everything changes. So it keeps, I believe it keeps the congregation very open to new change, how current events or different things will change, but we can still be open and be accepting and reaffirming. And also that we are all interconnected, how we as a community and a Sangha rely on one another to make sure the temple or the organization runs the way it does.
When Piper and I have been on panels for our daughter came out like 25 years ago or more. So we've been on many panels, and one was written up in the Star Advertiser. And that was a Saturday. And then on Sunday we went to temple, and one of our members came up and hugged me and thanked me for being so brave to speak out. And she was all teary-eyed, and I thought, wow, I didn't really think of it as a brave thing to do, but it really affected her. And we've had nothing but support. Like when our daughter-in-law was in labor, I think it happened to be part of it was during coffee hour after temple service. So I'm showing pictures to everybody. Here she is, and it's pretty soon, and then so people bought baby gifts for them, and they've never met them, and they've been nothing but supportive and excited about the family and things. So it's been very heartwarming, and we feel very accepted.
Okay, for us, for me, I don't want to presume to know what Gail is thinking, but but for me, I feel that one really great thing about the Buddhist temple, Hongwanji in particular, is that we're so accepting, non-judgmental. So, my whole family, not just my gay daughter and her family, but everybody is so welcome coming to church. And I mentioned that at church the last Sunday because I happened to be the MC, and I just said, this is like a family. I feel every Sunday when I come to temple, it's like a family, an extended family. So my daughter and her family is welcome just as anybody else. And I also wanted to point out too that when my daughter and her wife wrote Peace on Your Wings, the whole Hongwanji organization supported that play and her and it was irrelevant to the fact that she and her spouse, they were gay. It had nothing to do with her ability to write a play like that. And so I feel the Hongwanji as a total organization is very, very supportive, very non-judgmental and very accepting. Good job.
Okay, online.
Well, yeah, Chihiro kind of said what I wanted to say. But going back on that, like, learning like, Buddha accepts you as who you are, and so forth. It's always been like a learning. Well, I kind of learned that saying more recently, I guess, more in my high school years. And that really helped me as a person, like knowing that, the religion still supports you, and like the Sangha in and of itself is like a family as well, as they said. And like my Sangha specifically, they have watched me grown up from when I was little. So it's been like a really big support system for me as well. And I feel like as a community, we've been really accepting of that. Like for Junior YBA, we've been making resolutions about adding more gender inclusive things, like more resolutions about being more open to everyone coming in and not making it more like binary, I guess, so to speak. And that progression has been really positive, and I feel like we've had so much good feedback, and I feel like adding those things has made a big difference.
Thank you. And that kind of segues perfectly into the next question, which came from a participant who signed up and asked that we ask, what can the temple ministers Sangha do to make LGBTQIA plus people feel accepted and valued just as they are? For all panelists.
When I saw this question, I thought about one thing that I have sometimes noticed, and it relates to some of the things Camaron brought up earlier, because I am always very aware that we are fellow travelers on this path, and for some of us, we go at different speeds, or we don't even know which direction we're going, but we're trying. And we need to be kind and thoughtful to each other about that. So I try not to let it affect me when sometimes I hear a word that isn't the word I would pick for something. So I have sometimes found myself in a Dharma school class where, you know, a person is saying, what, you know, to my daughter, for example, tell us about your mom and dad, or go home and have your mom help you with that project. Well, my daughter doesn't have a mom. And of course, the same thing has happened when she was in DOE, and it's happened other places too, because I find myself saying that too. I grew up in the 1970s. That's kind of what you drank in. But it always pleases me when I see that people in leadership positions have taken the thought to make sure. And it's especially tricky when English isn't maybe even your first language, to think about, you know, not talking to kids about your mother and father, because many kids maybe don't have a mother and father. They live with one parent, they have multiple parents, they have two parents of the same gender. You know, and sometimes people say partner, and for me and Rudiger, we always prefer to hear the word husband. So in some ways, you know, it's different from our pronouns, but it rubs us very much the wrong way when people use the wrong word to describe our relationship. And so that's something that I appreciate when people take the sensitivity to reflect on that when they're choosing words for a Dharma talk or for a class that they're teaching at the temple. I think I'm passing it this way.
Okay, I think I already answered the question regarding temples and the Sangha. The Sangha is so critical, I think. And, you know, making everybody feel welcome. So I'll pass it on to Gil.
I think you know, just want to affirm that it's being welcoming, it's treating people and respecting people just as you would anyone else, you know. So I think that it's like it's normal, and it becomes a normal situation. So it's not like something out of the ordinary, but just being regular and just treating them like regular people, I think, and loving them, and, you know, being accepting, I think, is the most important thing. Yeah.
I want to take off on that. Even on the best of circumstances, there are many temple members who are reluctant to engage with strangers. When strangers come into a temple, there are lots of them are reluctant. Okay, and some temple members are even reluctant to engage with people they've seen every week for years. You know, we know that, we've been to the temple. Okay. So being very specific about welcoming, we have to treat, this question is not about making LGBTQ members of that community feel welcome. The question is, how do you make strangers feel welcome? How do you make everyone feel welcome? That's the question. And I'll give you some specifics, because what we need to do is treat everyone in the way we would like to be treated. Just simple as that. Okay, so this is how I want to be treated. I want people to smile and greet me. You know, I want everybody in my temple to smile and greet me, not only some. Okay. I want them to ask me, how are you doing? I want them to ask me, how's your family? And I want to answer them. And I want them to listen to me sincerely. I want them to know something about me, things I like to do and enjoy, and then ask me, how's it going? How's your golf game going? Or, you know, how's your exercise going? I'd like for them to share something about themselves, so that I can chat with them to see if we have mutual interests. An example is that I know someone at our temple who love to go to movies, a couple. We always chat about the movies we've gone to and our assessment. That little chat every week is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And so we need to be curious about each other. We need to be present. We need to be sensitive to how they're feeling. We need to be open about sharing our lives with them. And I think we ultimately need to think about this issue, is that treat them as fellow human beings. That's it. Not about LGBTQ, it's about fellow human beings. So that's my feeling about that issue.
Right, I definitely agree with that statement about to treat everyone the way they want to be treated, with equity and equality, that golden rule. I also want to kind of like bring up this little quote from the Golden Chain of Love that I kind of thought about when this question was brought up. Quote, I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. So I think that we really need to be able to get rid of this stigma and these barriers. And like, it's not really only the LGBTQ, it's different races, it's genders. And we see this outside the temple, we see this in current society. So it's really how to be open and how, I think as Cam said, to unlearn and because in reality, I think of it this way, but there's only one race, the human race, and we need to be able to work together in order to thrive as a community. And I think with what we're doing today with this LGBTQIA plus seminar, we're taking a step in that right direction to be able to understand and to be open, to break down the barriers and to create what was probably stigma maybe a few decades ago or years ago, and to make it something in the community that we can accept and we can learn about. So thank you for this learning opportunity.
And thank you. Online, do you have any comments?
I think all I wanted to say has been said, so I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your commitment to each other and for celebrating humanness, including those who are LGBTQIA plus. Being present with each other is so important, and celebrating one another is so important. I had one question to close with. I was going to ask for the LGBTQIA plus people. What message would you like to share with an LGBTQIA plus young person who might be listening today?
I guess I can go. So if I were to tell someone who is younger than me, like I have younger cousins, like I have two, and they're really sweet. And like I would just tell them like it's okay to feel like you're different. I don't think it's a bad thing. And like if they need someone, I'm here. Like I'm always the resource. But it's okay to feel different, and if you feel different, you can explore that. I mean, I personally did a lot of research before I said anything about myself, really. Like I would watch videos, I would watch things about like more do more research about that specific thing that I was like into. Like I didn't know what gender fluid was till, you know, freshman year, sophomore year. And after finding that out, I did more research and finding more guiding myself on what path I wanted to take with it. And it's been a really huge help. And I feel like even if you may not identify as part of the LGBTQ community, I feel like you should not be able to, but to be a support system for someone who may be struggling. And I think that's really important. Having that respect for each other is like the number one thing. It's like the golden rule, basically.
Thank you.
I think for me, my advice to a younger generation who's trying to explore their identity would be 2 words: dare greatly. This is something from Dr. Brene Brown's book with the same name, and it's just to encourage them to be vulnerable in a sense to be like, be open, to be able to share with people that you feel you care about, to not have any shame about it, that to have a community to be able to share this information with. Dare greatly as to explore what different identities you want. Don't be afraid of really conforming to society or trying to believe what other people think of you. It's because more in life, the people who really care about you, they won't care if you're gay, if you're non-binary. They'll care about who you are on the inside. So really just taking the time to reevaluate yourself and think of your intrinsic validation.
Well, I think for me, one of the things I would say, and I'm happy at our school, we have at least 3 members of our faculty and staff who are openly LGBTQIA+ people. I do not know how many of our students actually know that, but part of that is in Hawaii, you know, we don't go around wearing buttons all the time anymore. You know, we feel like we've made it to a certain level of acceptance. We don't need to wear it on our sleeve. But one thing that I reflect upon is when I was growing up, when I was the age Chihiro is now, I didn't know any openly gay people. I actually had my favorite teacher, one of them who was a lesbian and had been in like a 20-30-year relationship with another favorite teacher of mine, but it was not talked about in my school. It was whispered occasionally, like, do you know about so-and-so? Later on, that teacher and her wife came out and led like the equivalent of the Gay Straight Alliance, which did not exist at my school when I was a student there. But when I was growing up, I never expected that it would even be possible for me to be a high school teacher, to be an elder, to be a mentor, to be a parent, to be a spouse. These were not options that we were told you could have if you were gay or lesbian or any of the other things which were terms that most people didn't even know about in those days. And we are here and we are eager to be those things because it's exciting to be able to say, maybe, although things have changed a lot in 30 years, there are some things from my experience that I would love to share with you to support you and maybe give you encouragement that you can get through this difficult time of being a teenager who is dealing with these issues. Even if they're not the same issues that I dealt with, because they really aren't in a lot of ways. You know, times have changed. But there are people who are there for you. And it's not just at PBA, although of course, please do come to PBA. But, you know, many schools. And I'm excited to hear Camaron's been working with DOE and UH certainly has wonderful programs as well. But there are adults out there, teachers, mentors, elders, people who would really like to offer support and maybe some advice if that's what you need in your journey.
Yes, and to please know, everyone, that you are connected and that you have a commitment from Honpa Hongwanji that started before today and is continuing forward through programs like this, through conversations where this is sponsored by an amazing committee that's doing so much work. please join me in celebrating and thanking the committee and thanking the panel we have here today. And I'll pass the microphone over to Debbie.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and to our panelists. I wish we had a little bit more time for questions. If you do have any questions, if you could submit them online and I can try to forward them to the panelists and to Cameron for answers. I don't want to keep anyone too much more overtime because we've already gone beyond our 11 o'clock time. So in closing, I would like to express our heartfelt mahalo nui loa to Camaron Miyamoto for his wonderful presentation. And for being our moderator today, and to all of our incredible panelists, Chihiro Okawa, Jay Yokoyama, Rudiger Ruckman, even though he couldn't be here, and Benjamin Brook, Richard and Gail Tyra, and Piper and Lois Toyama. I did have one message from a participant online that I don't want to miss saying, but this participant had a shout out for Jay. And she said, I've always noticed that Jay shows love to all and she lives a true Buddhist life. So thank you, Jay. And thank you to the participant who said that. I'd also like to thank our planning committee who really helped us to put this together, as well as to help put the brochure together. We have Reverend Satoshi Tomioka from Puna Hongwanji, Susan Oshiro, our Oahu District Commissioner, who is at Mililani Hongwanji, and Reverend Blaine Higa, again, from the Committee on Social Concerns. We'll give them a big hand. And to our awesome technical support team today, Joy Nishida, Neil Yamamoto, and Derek Inoue. Thank you so much. So we will be sending out a post-seminar evaluation via email, and I'd like to encourage all of you to please complete and submit your evaluations. And as a reminder, we have recorded today's session, and we'll send out a link to all participants in the next several weeks when it's ready to go. We want to do some editing and put in some title slides, but that will be available for everybody. And we do plan to have more sessions as we move ahead with, and so we'll try to send to all of you that have registered for this today so that we can keep this excitement going, because it is something we want to definitely move forward with. And we have many more sessions to come so that we can relate our Buddhist teachings to the LGBTQIA+ community. So in closing, I'd like to close with a few quotes. The first one being from George Takei, who said, "We should indeed keep calm in the face of difference and live our lives in a state of inclusion and wonder at the diversity of humanity." And like Chihiro said, we are all one race, the human race. From Nelly Borrero, she said, "Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice we make every day. So as leaders, we have to put out the message that we embrace and not just tolerate diversity." And finally, from George Day, who is a professor at the University of Toronto, he said, "Inclusion is not bringing people into what already exists. It is making a new space, a better space for everyone." So let's all please continue to join together as we make a better space for everyone. Thank you so much.